our belief system as a society is more fragile than people think. If we've learned
Hmm.
anything, I won't bring politics into a podcast, but if we've learned anything from the last 5 years, we can completely divide people overnight.
The Move Entrepreneur Evolved Podcast. Get on it.
And we're back with another episode of the Moved Entrepreneur Evolved podcast. I'm excited about this episode today. Make sure that you like and subscribe. We got a lot of cool things to talk about. I got Mr. Will Webb here with the only lead strategy. How you doing, man?
Awesome, man. Thanks for having me. This is gonna be a lot of fun.
Yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun, man. This is going to be a lot of fun. We were just talking about surfing and wake surfing and all that kind of stuff. You get out quite often.
Yeah. So I'm actually kind of in the process of getting a boat, and I told my wife, I was like, the boat is the fun, but the house is the thing you kind of really want, and so we're working through that process right now, and through the the tail end of the pandemic and real estate going crazy, like we're kind of on the long game of hunting for that lake property to kind of allow us to really get out there more often, because it's like one of my biggest passions. So if anybody ever wants to hang out, then invite me to surf, and I'm pretty much going to say yes and show up. It's the easiest way.
I think, what's his name? And I'm gonna kick myself up. The guy has the long dreads.
Oh yeah, Austin Keene.
Austin, dude, this guy is incredible.
Nuts.
The guy's incredible. It was really fun because I like to watch skating, like skateboarding, and I still do. I just have like this. Basically, if you catch me at 2 a.m, I'm probably watching some kind of fighting or something, boxing or something, and then I go to skating, and then I watch skating, and I think that the failure and the like what you learn through board sports takes you through a lot of things. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, perseverance is huge. Anybody who's ever been on a skateboard knows that the first trick is an ollie, and then you go from the ollie to the kickflip. And the ollie is like this low bar kind of trick where the worst thing you can do is slide out and kind of fall on your elbow. But a kickflip, I mean, you can send that skateboard straight between your legs, and you can really change your opinion of skateboarding, right? So
heel flips will do it to you. Heel flip, the way the heel flip goes is it basically what happens. You kick this, and many times if you catch too early, you're straight.
Oh yeah. You just corn cob yourself, and it's just not like something. When you're going through that learning process, I think in anything that you learn, but in board sports, man, there's so many humbling modes. In wakeboarding, it's the back roll or the tantrum. There's so many times where you just catch an edge and eat it, and it's hurt. I mean, it's so painful, and so there's always like the step after the first step is typically the most grueling in that skill progression of a board sport.
Why do you think we need to?
And a lot of other things.
I think this also goes in like business as well. But like, what do you think it is about that personality that I would say that subjectively, I would say there's something to be said that men will actually say that when they go to war and they're just guys and they're fighting for this purpose, that's some of the best times of like a guy's life. Like they just, they're fighting for a purpose. They're doing what they want to do. And I think it's the same thing with like extreme sports, right? You go out, you try this boarding, you do all these things. And then I think it turns into like business as well. Obviously we're going to get into business and things like that, but I think it really turns into that same perseverance, the desire, because you put a lot of risk to get like that one trick, right? And then everybody like, shit like 99 times.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's so true. I mean, in fact, a lot of people, and thank you, anybody who's listening that's a veteran, given your service. Some people come back from war times and they actually miss it. They crave it. It actually changes a lot of the wiring in their brain to where that level of extremity, or not extremity, but extreme environment, creates a like no turnaround moment, right? Where it's like, now I've seen it, I felt it, and I can't go backwards. I have to find something that's similar in extreme. And so that's why you'll see a lot of people not just do one board sport. They reach that
Right.
skill rise, they get through the journey, if you will, they reach their peak potential, and then they say, all right, what's the next one? And I think entrepreneurship's similar. I mean, it kind of, there's always another level. There's always another, another thing that you're trying to get to. And you have to constantly evaluate what's the risk in getting to that next level and what's required of me to get to that next level.
Now, I know we're going to talk about lead strategy, and which is the business that you have now. But there was a comment that you made I thought that was quite interesting. You said, we help scale businesses, and we typically do it pretty fast. Our clients are people just like you who have a vision bigger than themselves, who need some help along the way. Our business leads with love and aggressively protects our people, clients, and partners' best interest, born during a global pandemic. We have no idea what normal is. What was going on during that time? Because that was a little while back, obviously a little bit post pandemic, but what was going on?
Yeah. So a little context, I started lead strategy as a side hustle. And I don't know how much you want me to talk origin story here. You might want me to kind of rip it.
Let it rip it, whatever it is, whatever you feel like is going to come out. You can do like that preacher that when you're done, you're like, I didn't even know what I was saying.
That's right. That's right. I'm blacking out starting now.
Speaking tongues. You can do that too if you'd like.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, lead strategy. So I was actually walking my dog, and I was actually dressed pretty similar to how I am right now. And Heidi was her name. She stopped me. Our dogs were playing, and she said, "Hey, you look like you might know something about business." It was literally just, I'm assuming, judging based on how I was dressed, which I don't know if that says something negative about my style, but that's another conversation. We were in this.
Talk about that.
Yeah, that's right. And so, we were having this conversation, and she said she's running a health coaching business, and I was a hired gun to build a division of an analytics business, and we were working with Under Armour and Lululemon and a bunch of really, really enterprise grade clients. And here she is, just a small business, living in the same apartment complex as me, and she's like, yeah, last month I did $20,000, and here I am thinking, like, hold up. She has no team, she's doing health coaching, and she's making $20,000 a month. Like that. Wow. That's pretty cool. And I had been in the online space before. This wasn't, the first time, but we sat down and
when did you enter the online space? What year?
Yeah. So that goes way back. I started an SEO agency, and just to pay for college. So that's a whole crazy story of itself. But I basically sat down and we started talking about our business. I didn't do anything, if I'm just being really honest, I didn't do anything crazy. All I did was look at our business, point out a couple things that I thought would make sense, and our business doubled. And she called me and she said, well, you got to quit your job. You got to go do this and help more people. And here I am thinking, like, I met this girl on a dog walk, and 2 weeks later, she tells me to quit my job. And, I'm thinking to myself, well, I'm like at the top of the consulting game, like I'm building this division. I've got the enterprise clients. I've got all the things that society says, like, this is what you're supposed to achieve. Right. And so,
you feel accomplished
I'm traveling
at Christmas events and Thanksgiving when they're like, you made it, you got the big office.
Right. Yeah. It's like, oh man, Will's like a big executive in Atlanta kind of thing, because I've come from a small town in Tennessee. And so a lot of times people are like, man, he made it, and I kind of had that, like, that thing that was happening in the back of my head from the people that I grew up with. And so I started Lead Strategy, but I didn't quit my job. I kept the job. I had built a team, a product that I was super proud of. And frankly, I was learning a lot. That CEO was a great mentor to me. And I was still going through this curve of, like, what's lead strategy going to be? What are we going to do for people? All I did was give her a little bit of advice, and she went and executed. And I don't think that's every client. And I don't think that that's maybe a quantifiable offer. So let me figure that out. And so when Lead Strategy started, I had this belief that enterprises had access to education and material that small businesses had never experienced. And that hypothesis came from the thought that most entrepreneurs were not particularly fond of school. They were not particularly fond of structure. They were not particularly fond of authority. And because of those characteristics, a lot of entrepreneurs were self-taught and self-learned. But when you're self-taught and self-learned, then you don't get the intellectual curiosity and components of a billion-dollar organization that has thousands of people thinking towards one objective. So what does that look like? And what things can we distill down from that to be able to replicate in a small business to create rapid
I think
scale?
that's really cool that you say that, because I was actually having a conversation with someone else before, and they were a content writer. And as they were writing, they then went and worked for this fairly large organization. And the question that I had from him is, I said, I bet the writing was different, but what was the process? And the process was extremely different. Once you have different pieces of the puzzle, you can send it down. You get somebody that can, look at the content. Then you got somebody that can actually say, is this going to fit? And then that person can then explain it to the designer on how they want to flow it through.
Yeah.
Compared to when you're a solo entrepreneur, you kind of throw all that in your own head.
Yeah. 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 You pull up Canva and you're like, I think this is going to work, and then you put it into your favorite, web delivery app, and then you got to ship
then
it, right?
Then it doesn't, it's not sized right. And then you spend 45 minutes trying to shift the size or whatever. You're like, damn, I spent all day for 3 pixels so I can make it fit into this. But with what you're saying though, is that at that level, those things are already there. And once you see them, you then kind of go, oh, I can see the finish line, and then you can kind of change it up a little bit. And so as you continue, what was the next part of the story?
Yeah. So we've actually gone through a couple evolutions. So we first started thinking, I thought to myself, entrepreneurs are visionary people. And most entrepreneurs we met, it's like an 80-20, right? Probably not a perfect 80-20, but a lot of entrepreneurs are visionaries and not operators. So I started to think, well, let's lead with strategy. Let's take their vision and fix their actual strategy for how they're running their business. And that will allow them to fast track scale, because they're not going to blow themselves up and have to rebuild, right? Let's fundamentally solve those root problems of that 3-pixel orientation in the email so that they don't spend 45 minutes, because if they spend it now, they'll spend it later, right? And so how do we cut out a lot of those inefficiencies early on and grease the rails so that we can really hockey stick? Because when you reach exit velocity, it changes every component of how you're able to grow the business, all your valuations, all of your success metrics, and how fast you can hit the market. So there's so many dynamic components that we realized if we solve the operational complexity first and then promote or scale with more clients, it's a better equation than if we just lead with, we're going to get you leads, we're going to get you booked calls, whatever else people are offering, right?
Would you say that still is with that leading with that hook? You think that hook's just being burned out?
It attracted a different client than I expected. And that leads me to the next pivot, but I'll tell you why, what it led to. So what I found was that I wasn't selling a scalable offer, right? Because when we do fractionalized COO services and we build the strategy of the future visionaries of the US or whatever nation we're talking about, we had a client, that we got there and, they were, running 3 businesses, and they were doing, about $1 million in each business, a little over in one, a little less on another. And we took those, and now, that same entrepreneur has been working with us for several years, has over $50 million in revenue in 3 years, and 6 businesses, right? And the way we were able to do that was because of the belief that they had that I have a vision big enough to handle this kind of velocity and this kind of revenue. But it isn't every entrepreneur that has that. And frankly, it isn't every entrepreneur's goal. We call the people like that client, we call them empire builders. And not everybody is starting a business for an empire, right? Some people are starting it for a legacy. Some people are starting it for a lifestyle. And the empire builders, they're not like people who want a lifestyle business. They're grinders. They want to work 100 hours until they die. They're not people who are looking at it from a retirement standpoint. They're looking at impact. And And that doesn't mean lifestyle people can't run a fantastic business. It just means that they have a different value complex where they're assigning different things. And so our empire builders is who we were attracting. And because empire builders are workhorses, it became an unsustainable component of scale where the more they grow, the more we grow because we built the deal that way. But also now I have more risk to the business, right? I have more concentration risk. I have to swell my team to specifically staff for that business. And I don't have long-term security. And so
it's interesting that you bring that up because this is something
Yeah.
that this is a conversation for people, I think, that are going through this a lot. And I think that it's a lot of these structuring deals that you're talking about is kind of a rev share. And then as you rev share, the problem is that if you have all your risk on one position and you don't have any front end, then you really don't have a pipeline of any business coming through. And so you really are at a risk of, and I think there's a lot, I don't know if you probably still run these deals like this, but there's a lot of hope involved. So you're like, okay, I hope they're going to do this. I hope they're going to do this, but you don't really have any control of those people. So interesting that you brought that up because I'm seeing this where people are wanting to do the rev shares, but they're emotionally so connected that really it becomes just a job and you're working for that one rev share.
Right.
And so I think that that's an interesting conversation that you bring this up. So yeah. So continue.
Yeah. You're so right. Like when you have a dynamic scope of work, right, then that means that the scope itself is going to move as the business needs change. And that doesn't necessarily mean your percentage of rev share is going to be reevaluated. And so you're constantly in this debate with how you're going to manage profitability of the deal. People think that, oh, well, when they grow, we grow, and that's going to protect us. No, because you then have to assume that as it grows, your profit increases. If your profit stays steady, then ultimately you're now weighting over to the side. So I'll paint a picture as an example. If the contract's a six-figure, $100,000 contract, and because of your percent setup, it doubles to 200,000, are you able to deliver it with the same team, or do you need more people? If you need more people, how much is that diluting your profitability? And if it's diluting your profitability at all, then it isn't scalable, right? Because what you've done is now you've flipped the value prop so that you can protect the long-term interest of the account instead of reversing it to where it's an investment that you put in upfront work and you reaped the benefit long-term. So the way we structure deals now is a little bit different than that. We still offer fractionalized COO services. We offer full-scale advisory, and we also offer full-blown turnkey. We run your business for you, and that is like all of that is off menu, right? We don't actually go to market with any of that stuff. Those are all very one-to-one conversations. They require a full-blown audit. So now we run an audit on the business to make sure that they're viable and that we actually have high confidence in their ability to grow. So we look at 3 years of books of financials, and we look at every single component of that business as if we were going to acquire them. And then we do a cash plus percent plus equity deal that has multiple levers that move into the next stage, so that eventually all of our clients now know we're looking for a passive stake in your business or an active operating stake. And if it's an active operating stake, we're taking more equity, right? If it's a passive stake, we'll stay low on the equity, on the cap table. But if we're going to really be involved in this long-term, then we're actually looking for this to be a long-term profit for us. And here's how we're structuring it. So we're super transparent.
What revenue,
and that helps.
What revenue makes sense in a model like this?
So I find that, and this is like wild, right? Because I'm just not gonna leave anything out. A lot of people will hold back like some of the stuff, but I think it's super important for people listening to be thinking about like, what are people really doing? This is that steak, right? This isn't sizzle. This is straight steak, and so we found that 5% of revenue is a really solid way to scale it. And if your client is willing to do that, then that's great. But think about 5% of revenue at $10 million is a $500,000 contract, right?
Correct.
So if that's going to be how it's arranged, then your client has to understand your value at every juncture along the way, because eventually
Really
they
good
look
call.
at
Yeah.
their books
Eventually, yeah, exactly.
and they're like, 500K, I can go hire
Why
three,
should it?
5
Yeah,
resources,
exactly.
right?
Exactly. And many times if there is no done for you, there's a component of like, well, what are they doing? Like I'm coming to
Right.
work every day and now what are they doing? And I
Yeah.
think that a lot of these times these deals get structured so heavy because there's not very many of them. So when
Mhm.
the, let's say, the consultee that wants to come in, usually they'll say, oh, okay, 20% or something like that. But what sometimes ends up happening is, you're right, they hit a 90-day spot and you gave themselves, gave them a good hockey stick, and it starts to stabilize and you're like, why am I paying 20% to
Right.
somebody that it
Right.
just has an opinion? And I'm not saying that that's not valuable, but I think it's
Yeah.
just natural. I think it's
Yeah.
just natural. One of the things, and as you go through this process and you jump in, and you're like, okay, I'm going to do this. Obviously, come with lead strategy. I think it'd be right to say, do you go straight for high end lead front end when you start, because then that's the only way to filter things out? I think that this is an interesting conversation because I think people have this misconception of, all I got to do is get in there and talk to this many people and then I can make this many deals. But you really don't have a business with input and an output, which means you don't have any energy.
Yeah.
So do you go to try to increase energy on the front end, or do you usually try to use what lead stuff they have and then work more on the back end? What do you guys like to do when you start?
And you're talking about it as we come into client businesses, or how we think
Yeah,
about lead strategy specifically?
I guess, well, I mean, that would be when you go in, you would use lead
Yeah.
strategy. So I guess
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
just kind of map it that way.
Yeah.
Um,
That's fair.
but what are
Yeah.
your thoughts on, do you go in and look at back end first in the audit, or do you like to put more pressure on the front end if you're going to increase revenues?
Yeah. So, the answer of a classic consultant is always it depends. But, first off, there's a big misconception. People want to run a VSL to try to sell these kind of deals, and like that's not it. If you're going to actually get high quality clients that can afford to pay you $500,000 a year, then you're going to need to actually spend time face to face with these people, right? These kind of clients are people I'm flying to, right? I'm not sitting behind my desk on a Zoom call trying to create this massive amount of leverage. I'm just going old school. I'm getting involved in their business because at the end of the day, my effective rate per hour makes sense to do it that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
But to answer your question directly, when we audit a business and we think about which side of the house we're going to fix, we have a framework called VP3, and it starts with vision, and then it's people, process, promotion. And so when we're auditing, we're trying to figure out where they have the biggest deficiency, and then we ask ourselves, if we were to add and scale the promotion of this business, what would break and how bad would it break? So there's a certain amount of complaints or negativity in the system that I'm willing to allow as we grow. But I'm also not going to let a business who can't deliver their service get scaled up on the front end, because it ruins their reputation. So then I'm going to fix the people problem. If they can't articulate to me what their end-to-end delivery process is, we're going to fix processes before we ever go and generate more promotion, right? And a lot of that comes in the qualification stage. If they're going to go and leapfrog over the front end of our funnel, and they're going to come in on the back end as a personal relationship, they already have a 7-figure business. That's one of the qualifying criterias. And then ultimately they already are interested in understanding that we're not looking at a 3-month contract, a 6-month contract. We're looking at a 3-year plan, right? And they don't have to sign a 3-year contract with us. That's not required, but they have to really be in it in the long term. So part of the qualification process is how fast do they want to fix this, and so that's why it depends.
That's an interesting
But
question, right? What kind of answers do you get when people say, I just want to, how fast do you want to fix this?
yeah. So last month, we had about 60 people that wanted to work one-on-one with us, and we let 2 come through. And that's because I'd say 80% of the time, here's what an entrepreneur says. They saw somebody out on the world right? That does $1
I
million
like how
a
you put
month.
that. I like how you put that. Because I get the visual, right? Because you're online and you're like, there's somebody out there.
Yep. Yep. They
The
saw that
perfect
post,
man, the
right?
perfect man.
Right. Right. It's the perfect guy. He's got it all figured out. He's 22. He drives a Lamborghini, and somehow he's managed to make $1 million last month. And he only been working for
And I
3
want to
months.
know
It's
how to
amazing.
do. That's what I want you to do.
Right.
That's
And
what I
that's what
want.
I want lead strategy to do for us. And so generally, like if they come through like that, ultimately that's a mindset problem. They're looking for fast success, and fast success is totally fine, right? You can go viral and you can have that instant success, but as fast as it comes, it goes, right? You have to build a bulletproof foundation to be able to have a business that's here in 10 years, right? The statistics do not fail, right? Businesses fail over the long term. And that's because people are looking for too fast of success. They don't have a vision beyond themselves. And so all they're trying to do is hit this financial hit rate. And they're saying, I want to make, 100K a month. It's like, why? What does that do for you? How does that change your life? Right? Like, let's talk about the why you want that. Because if it's just 100K to say you have a 100K a month business, like that's an ego thing. Let's talk about why you're actually growing 100K.
But if
business.
I can say it's because I want to have a lake house so I can wakeboard on, then we could have that talk.
Yeah, because now you have something, right?
Yeah.
And then I'm going to ask
people,
you another,
which includes people. It includes, I think it's funny how you said that, kind of just throwing back on it, but it's funny how you said the house, because I think that the house is the most important thing, because that's where the stories are made. I mean, yeah, you go on a boat, you go on a thing like that, but anyways, I just injected that. But yeah,
no, it's real.
I think that where people come in, I think in expectations, I think that you're right. I think that people don't try to build something that's going to last very long. I don't like to bring up Gary Vee very often, but Gary Vee does a good job telling people, like, have patience, build something.
Yeah.
Very interesting. So many times they want to go with, they say super fast, and then you build expectations underneath that.
Yeah. And you're going to probably see just some social media content come out like in the next couple of days around this concept around, unless you have world-class discipline, you can't get world-class results, right? And so most of the people that want 3 months of success do not have the discipline to be able to actually live through what I would need them to do in the next 3 months to do it. Because growth is a formula, it's a machine. And so when you reverse engineer the machine, you can do it. But are you an Olympic athlete in business? Or are you just a regular old Joe coming off the couch thinking you're going to run a marathon next week? Like, as long as you're actually that Olympic athlete and you've been preparing for this moment, we might be able to play ball. Yeah. But your answers would never. Most of the people who are Olympic athletes waiting for that moment, they're the people who are saying, sometime in the next 3 years, I want to be able to really make this business what it was supposed to be, right? They're leading from a place of, I've been working on this for a long time. I've been thinking about this since I was little. I've been just obsessive over this thing. And now I'm ready. I just need help. I need guidance, right? Those are the people that ultimately make it through.
I think that there's an interesting thing, and that is that the business is an energy entity. And many times when you kind of slowly build something, that energy, if you're consistent, is like a slow moving train, and you can fall off of it and then get back on, because the train's just now got some kind of pace. But I think that what you're even talking about is like people just want to come in and think that there's this spike. But the problem is there wasn't enough time when things starts to get weird. If you have a distribution channel, then you didn't have a second distribution channel. And then all of a sudden that one falls apart. And then the next round you have, all of our cold emails working, or whatever your outreach is that you're doing, or however you're attracting people. And then that doesn't work. And so I think that what you're talking about, and I think like even what Gary Vee talks about, is he's like, keep something steady for a long time, and then you kind of build some substance underneath it. And you also tend to answer questions differently when you're in it longer, as far as like the experience, and kind of share the story. And so I think that what you're talking about is people just, they assume that they can get something that's going to maybe take a little bit more grit. My question is, because you obviously, it's great, you met Heidi, and Heidi put you, but where was that pivot for you that you went, okay, did you bring on a partner yourself, or is this do you just do this on your own?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we have a full team. But yeah, I'm a solo founder. And I think, a big key, if you're a solo founder out there, that's fantastic. But be really conscious of your loneliness. And what I mean by that is like, I'm happily married. I just actually recently got married. So, and I haven't even hit my 1 year mark yet. Right. So,
Congratulations, man. I know I saw the
yeah.
pictures.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I always tell people like never give up,
Yeah.
But I do think relationships are funny. Not that you asked, but like, I like given up. I was like the place of just like my will had been broken, and that was when she came along. And so I think a lot of that can be said in a lot of other aspects too. But don't like make sure you're like evaluating your inventory of loneliness, because I had mentioned earlier, about my friends that I grew up with.
Mhm.
And I didn't have a bunch of friends that just like went on and were in Forbes magazine. Like that's not how my story goes. I had to outgrow so many friend groups that I can't even tell you, because I started from a place that's so much different than today. And it's taken me 15 years to get here. And so, now whatever you see or whatever you think, we're just getting started, and I'm 15 years in. And so, when you put that into perspective, you're going to outgrow your friends. You might outgrow your family. You might outgrow your loved ones, because people have to grow with you for them to survive the change that you're invoking upon yourself. For you to get to the next level of entrepreneurship, you have to be willing to abandon what you know. And that's freaking terrifying. It's so scary. And so that
And I think
loneliness,
everybody that talks about it is going, I think that's the interesting thing about this is that even though you talk about it and I talk about it, it still's real for it. Like sometimes things sound like they're motivationally speaking, but I think a lot of times you're just talking to yourself to get through that shit.
totally,
You know what I
totally.
mean? Like, dude,
Yeah,
like, we're going to get off this call and we still have that. When I think it's interesting you brought up the loneliness, because right now we're having a good time. And then you just go, okay, goodbye. And you go through that like 10 seconds of trying to find the end button on Zoom, and you kind of look at each other.
yeah,
Like gotta
yeah,
turn it off. But then once it goes off, there's that loneliness in this industry.
totally. Because it's like a fraternity or a sorority, right? Like entrepreneurs get each other in a completely different wavelength, regardless of where you are in your journey. Like, oh, you have imposter syndrome? Yeah, me too. Right. And guess what? That guy who has $1 billion startup in Silicon Valley, he's got imposter syndrome too. Like a lot of the things that plague us as entrepreneurs don't go away. We just figure out how to manage them differently. And so that inventory of loneliness, like, I'm in Atlanta. I don't have a single Atlanta based client. Right. And people think that that's really interesting. And I had to join up like all these entrepreneur communities in Atlanta, because I was like, man, nobody sees me. Like nobody understands what's going on, and just because my business is doing really well, from a metric standpoint, there's moments where I don't know what to do because I've got no one else to sound off of. Right. I'm lonely in that I'm going through this journey, and even my own wife is fantastic, but she can only just listen. She can't actually influence because she's not an entrepreneur, right? And so your support system is critical to your success long term. And that's why I always say, like, if you don't have a coach, go get one. And that's
Yeah.
not just because I sell coaching services, right? Like a lot of people, I can understand how that I could have like a motivation there, right? But like,
No, I think it's
but
just in
genuinely,
general. Yeah,
yeah, like
yeah.
just in general, like you need a coach. You need somebody who can be in your corner, that can see it from a different perspective, that can give you that unique take. But you also need friends who aren't coaches. You need people who are just that genuinely care, right? That call you on a Saturday and say, "Hey, man, you want to go to the park and throw frisbee?" Like, just those little things.
Well, I
Because
think it's something that kind of goes back to our conversation earlier. I think that when you talked about, we talk about board sports, you talk about getting in the water. A lot of times those bring people that are trying to do
yeah,
failure sports as well. And I think it is a big proponent, like even myself. I mean, I do Muay Thai, I surf, I got a longboard here. I'll try not to skating, eating shit, skating nowadays just hurts really fucking
yeah,
bad,
it hurts
man.
so
It
much
hurts
worse.
bad, dude. I took a digger over here. I did the old, I was like, oh, I'm going to go to the mailbox and I'm going to take my longboard. And I was like, okay, so I got it on there and I didn't wear my shoes or anything. And I kind of did the old come around and I go to make a turn and I was just not going very fast. I hit that rock And
Oh,
I did the old whoop, 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 you know, that one to go whoop, whoop.
oh
And it's
yeah.
like, what's gonna, and this thing just slides out. I'm
Yeah.
probably in the air 3 feet in the air, perfectly
Yeah.
parallel. I land, no shit, Will. I land, I land on my shoulder bone. I hit my head. I hit my elbow. I hit my knee bone. I hit my ankle. And I remember I hit that concrete so hard. I literally was like, why did I do anything that jeopardizes my body to get hurt ever in my life?
Yeah.
My soul left me for a quick minute, and I crawl over to the grass and I just lay in the grass, and it was like a steel rod hit every bone in my body. But anyways, I don't know why I went on that, but I think that I think that anyways, there you go, guys. Eat shit on
No,
skateboards.
yeah.
But I guess my point is that one of the things that I think that I miss seeing, and that isn't especially in the internet industry, is that you don't see people showing. I think you do. I try to. Maybe it's just an era thing or whatever. But you're showing pictures of being on the boat. That's one of the things I saw in your thing. I was like, oh, I'll get along with this guy. You're enjoying yourself. You're doing things outside of work. And what I think that is happening in a lot of entrepreneurship is that it's just a cycle. There's no fun outside. You know, they're not showing
Yeah.
pictures of snowboarding, or, you know, they're not showing pictures of going and playing like group softball. And I think
Yeah.
that the conversation that we're just having right now is like almost an encouragement for those people to do those things. And what you're saying
Totally.
is find friends outside of this stuff. And I
Yeah.
think that that's a misconception. And when people say, oh, you're going to outgrow your friends, no, just outgrow your friends in that area, and then just
Right.
go be that with those people,
Yeah.
and then continue on your journey. Because if not, you're eventually you just leave everybody. And I mean, I don't know, I've got some knucklehead friends and I really like them, you know.
Yeah.
Don't ever talk about this kind of stuff, and you just wrestle or you do whatever. And so I think that your conversation about that is really healthy to business
Yeah.
owners.
And I mean, that really just comes to authenticity. Like, don't do the thing you think you're supposed to do that makes you look successful. You know, I love cars. Like, I love cars a lot. And I'm not even talking about like Lamborghinis and Ferraris. I'm talking about like that gritty, you know, just thing with the rusted paint that's somebody's pride and joy they've built up over the last 8 years. Like, you know, the rat rods. I mean, and so I think you got to do the things that you need to or want to do, and don't worry about judgment. You know, like, if anybody knows what paramotoring is, a friend of mine does a ton of paramotoring, and it's basically like a parachute with a with one of those like swamp buggy motors on the back, the big
Dude,
fans, you know, and
it's
and
so
they just go
gnarly.
flying, right? And it's like, what a nerd sport, right? I'm over here. Now, granted, I used to play Dungeons and Dragons, so I'm not here to like cast shade on the nerds, but like, what a nerdy sport. You know, how do you even find something like that? But he loves it. And then you see the footage from it and you're like,
Yeah.
wow, I want to do it. You know, I think I need to do paramotoring. And so just like, don't worry about playing golf or tennis or whatever you're like, you think you're supposed to do to meet those successful people. Like, successful people are in every space, right?
Sure.
And so the one commonality of successful people is they're all in. So if you're going to go and do Muay Thai, then you're going to need to get good enough to be in the room with the people who are good at Muay Thai, because those people are probably also the people you want to be around, right? It's not the people who are just starting like you. You've got to get through a couple layers to get access to the final boss. And that final boss is really who you're trying to hang out with, right?
Oh, that's true. It is the
Yeah.
guy you want to hang out because he has the wisdom, he has the stories.
Right.
There's no bullshit there.
Right.
There's no bullshit.
And there's humility, you know, because by the time you get to a point, you realize like how much you don't know. There's more you don't know than you'll ever know. And so that's like really a lot of humility to just be like, we scale businesses for a living, but like, I don't know anything. You know, it's like, it's that moment, right?
Yeah.
It's that moment.
Yeah. I was just on, and I was talking about Richard Branson. Actually, I have the book up here, and he has a thing. It's called "Screw It, Just Do It." I think that is what he says. Yeah, screw it, just do it. And he basically has an idea of just go for it. Like, if you're going to do it all in. But the thing I think that it's interesting, like, where sometimes people will it's a lot easier to move. Did you see that Grant Cardone billionaire thing? Like, where he was like, he had to grow to $1 million in like 6 weeks or something like that.
Yeah. Yep.
Did you see that?
Yeah.
And,
there was a couple billionaires that did that show, right?
Yeah, but the thing I think was interesting that he came back, he was just so honest. He was like, I didn't realize how much my name has traveled when I want to go do something, I have all the pieces in place. I could be like, oh, I want to have a health scenario, 10x health thing or something. And he's like, boom, okay, let's do it. But what he did is when he went out there, he's on the street. He's like, I realized how much, when you don't have anything, how hard it is. And I think people underestimate how difficult it is to get a rocket into the air.
100%. 100%.
When you when you decided to start systematizing this model, did you replace yourself on a sales side, or what was one of the first positions that you replaced yourself in lead strategy?
Yeah. So, I have an odd set of strengths. And so I first kind of just re-inventoried. Every few years, your strengths and weaknesses shift. Kind of like your personality type. It can have some variability to it based on the influences that you have. And so for me, I kind of just looked at my weaknesses and said, let's hire there first. Because so the very first thing that I did was, I'm not a great note taker. I'm an out loud processor. So for me, it was like, I think I need somebody that's going to be in here to help with delivery, to really take the notes and project manage, to keep things organized so that we don't drop the ball ever. Right. Because I love getting in calls and getting really inspired and really building out these wicked plans. And then it's like, well, if nobody wrote that down, then I'm never going to say it the same twice. So, we're hopefully somebody captured it, and fortunately, like, we have Grain that we use to like transcribe stuff, and we have like tools now, but first thing was somebody to help with delivery, for these hiring clients. And then the next piece was a setter. So I didn't want to do a lot of the high volume stuff anymore. So that was an area that I kind of segmented. The next piece was social media. So still doing sales at that point. And then finally I kind of offloaded sales, and I still pick up some shifts in sales. I still pick up shifts in delivery. I still pick up shifts in social. I think that entrepreneurs that want to have an audience and that want to build something that's going to last, they have to recognize that their content is their brand. And so they need to be very anal on how that actually looks and how it's supposed to come across. And then sales, ultimately somebody who's motivated on a commission basis to sell for you is going to get most of those clients in. And that's because they're doing their job. But as a founder, you have a different obligation. You have an obligation to find the right people and to accept the right people in. Mm-hmm. And when you commission someone, they're not interested in the right people. They're interested in getting that commission. And so I try to keep the sales role personal as long as possible to make sure I'm controlling the quality of the community. And then I'm able to really scale it easier, because I'm not fighting against these clients that frankly don't want to be coached, or they don't want to put in the work, or whatever the kind of circumstance is.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, because they all go together, because then usually the people that aren't wanting to do the work usually they complain a lot more. And ultimately it comes down, like what you had said, it came down like a discipline, and be able to sort of just repeat things over and over again, especially if they're building a brand for the next level. There's a lot of noise out there. What do you think, kind of will kick this into interesting, and what do you think about this Bing and ChatGPT?
Yeah. So before I was with, before I started Lead Strategy, we designed algorithms for sourcing and procurement data. So we're talking trillions of lines of data, and for everything that companies buy. And before that, I was with a Big Four consulting company doing pharmaceutical robotics, and we were designing algorithms for that. So vision system based algorithms. And a lot of it was artificial intelligence oriented. And I did a certificate program through MIT to learn about, artificial intelligence and machine learning. And then you fast forward, and now we have ChatGPT, we have Jasper, we have all these tools at our disposal. You can even build full-blown images. I think the interesting thing about it that I'll say is, I think of it as an efficiency tool, not a replacement tool, where we are today. And that doesn't mean that in the future it won't change. But as of today, I can tell when someone has super bland ChatGPT scripting, and when they're using ChatGPT to aid in something that could have been original, And the problem with algorithms generally is they're the best at social engineering. So we're very easily influenced and manipulated in the scheme of things. When you cut out the noise, then think about the amount of interactions and micro tunings that you're getting through an algorithm like on social media. So now magnify that to ChatGPT and start thinking about everyone using the same prompts that they got on YouTube and everyone using the same thing that they learned. And there's no origination. And so now the algorithm is ultimately influencing your opinion on a topic. And so now you think that if you get it to write you a social media caption using the AIDA framework, then great. That prompt is cool. It's better than just saying, write me a social media caption with no context. But what it's failing to realize is you're going to take that AIDA thing and you might modify 10% of it and you post it. How many hundreds of other people asked it the same question?
You know, it's interesting. You're right. And the only thing about search engines is you still come up with your own conclusion. I mean, even if you don't go past the top 10 on the top, but you're right. You do kind of collectively come up with a decision and then kind of deliver it. Compared to what I didn't think about that one, is that ultimately people will end up coming up with the same answers, which that's okay, but you're not going to have any originality or input from things that you're doing in your normal life, which I think makes originality, right?
Yeah. And, you know, we, our belief system as a society is more fragile than people think. If we've learned anything, I won't bring politics into a podcast, but if we've learned anything from the last 5 years, we can completely divide people overnight, right?
Oh, yeah.
All we need is a catalyst and we can divide people. So you have one camp that's saying ChatGPT is going to replace all the jobs. And you have the other camp that says, oh, it'll never happen. That's going to create a division. And ultimately, you know, kids are using it to cheat on exams. Think about how that's intellectually shaping them over time.
Oh my gosh. And
they're not actually getting into
the whole
that.
Time.
Right.
And they're dancing on TikTok while the answer's being generated.
But is this the next art renaissance? Does this ChatGPT thing shift us into an art renaissance instead of an industrial revolution? Do people now have more time to focus on creativity with no boundary because of it? Or do they use it as a crutch and we remove creativity? And so I think it'll be really interesting over the next few years. Before, when you created an echo chamber to validate yourself, you used other humans to do it. You found communities based on how you engaged on social media. And so now it's like, before to know it, all my political beliefs are validated by all these people on social media. And it's because I don't see the other side anymore, because Instagram is trying to get me to stay here as long as possible.
Yes.
Same thing with ChatGPT. Now you don't need another human to validate you. You just need a bot, right?
To validate it.
Yeah.
And the sad thing is that we don't have anything, not kind of being political, but we don't really have anything bringing us back together. For many years, war was the way that you brought people back together. You would have a war and then everybody would have a common reason to fight. We also would use the Olympics. The Olympics were amazing during times of war when they could actually use the Olympics as a commonality that we're going to come together in sport and then, move through. But I think right now there's so much, I don't know if we have a commonality right now. It's hard to say, right? That we could come up with something to kind of bring us together. What is your driving force of staying in business and maybe not going back into a corporate world? What has been kind of I think people could hear a little bit of just reasons why you stay an entrepreneur. I think it's a good way to kind of work our way through the end of this.
Yeah. Freedom. You know, freedom is a huge part of it. You'll always have a boss. You'll always have somebody that you report to. You'll always have somebody who sets your schedule or your agenda. But how much they influence it is ultimately depending on how you structure your life. And so you can have a business that's a job, or you can have a business that's an investment or an asset. You can have it be both over time. A lot of what influences me is that there becomes a tipping point where power becomes more important than money. And
just having that conversation.
Yep. And so every time someone is motivated by power over money, then their ethics change. And what it is a bunch of microaggressions. So your ethics start out in business. I'm not going to do it that way because my boss did it to me like that, and I'm not willing to do it, right? 10 years later, you're doing what your boss did. because you realize that your decision-making has to be different to get to where you want to go. Right. And so for the longest time in history, business requires you to step on heads to get to where you want to go. And my motivating factor is to change the way that we think about that. If we were like a rugby team and we lock arms and push together, we all win.
Mm-hmm.
But if we really truly feel like instead of being lifted, we have to step on someone unwillingly, then we've lost the long-term influence game. And when we shift over to a power complex over a financial complex, and we make our decisions based on how I can win instead of you, then we've removed capitalism, we've removed innovation, we've removed a lot of what makes society incredible, what makes humans incredible.
Yeah.
So the thing that motivates me is just to be authentic and just to say, hey, I don't have this figured out. Hey, this is where I'm at and here's where I want to go. And I don't know how to get there. And by the way, it doesn't have to be somebody who's already been there that teaches me how. It could be somebody who's at a completely different spot than me, who says, hey, Will, did you think about it like this? Hey, what if we did this? Or what if, right? What if we had a world where we didn't have to necessarily own our own business, right? Like there are portfolio companies where you're the CEO, but you own a portion of it, but you don't own all of it because your best use, your highest value to society is actually just running something instead of owning it, right? And so when people drop the insecurities of I need to identify this way, then you start to get into the real minutia of happiness. And you start to get into that next plane of instead of focusing on power, why don't we focus on happiness? Right? The US specifically.
Isn't that kind of funny? Isn't it funny that you really, as business owners start to grow and they start to make money, that they are chasing the happiness?
Yeah.
It's really what you're looking for because the freedom is what you wanted to do in the beginning. I think it's like, this idea of when you start a business, you're like, okay, I'm going to do this business. I'm going to grind it out. But there's always in the back of the mind where someone's like, I'm going to have some fun.
Yeah. 100%.
I think that some of that, it became I think it became a bad word for a while, but I grew up at a time where it was like work hard, play hard. And I think that some of that has been diluted where people went, oh, this whole balanced life. And I don't think that really people understood that if you would work what you're doing and then actually have good, fun experiences, the ones on the outside are the ones that you're going to be telling anybody anyways. Like the one you wakeboarding and like, like you do all those things, you snowboard, you probably snowboard, but you skate or you do all this stuff. So like, those are the stories you're going to remember. And so I think what you're saying is even in this business model is that it should be the thing that feeds those things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dude, This has been incredible, man. This has been really fun. How do people get a hold of you, Will?
Yeah.
The lead strategy himself.
Yeah. I mentioned social media and all that stuff. One of the best ways out of the gate is just to connect somewhere on social media. I'm on all the platforms. So whatever your platform of choice is, most of the time it's Will S. Webb. So whether that's Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, YouTube, wherever it is, you should be able to Google it and find it. And, obviously if we can help, then reach out. Most of the time we're giving a ton of resources away because we really want to work with businesses who are stuck, not businesses who are starting. But we obviously, anyways, there's a whole thing for that. But yeah, so that's the best way to connect. And I'd love to meet as many people as we can.
It's awesome, man. Well, this has been another great episode. Will, you knocked it out of the park. I appreciate you, man.
Thanks, man.
Anybody out there that hasn't liked and subscribed, make sure you do that on the channel.
Do it.
And then also make sure that you go back because there's many other amazing guests that have been on the podcast as well. Check those out. And from there, that closes out this episode of Moved Entrepreneur Vault. See you guys.
If you like this episode, make sure you smash the like button and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Just like Nike is to athletes, Moved is to entrepreneurs.